The 40-year conflict between the U.S. and Afghanistan, a complete history. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, 1979 to 1989. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, fearing the spread of Islamic extremism and wanting to secure its southern borders. This marked the beginning of a decade-long conflict that changed Afghan and world history. Afghanistan became a key battleground in the Cold War, a direct confrontation between the Soviet Union and the West. In response, the United States saw an opportunity to strike back at the Soviets. The U.S. began to fund, train, and equip Afghan fighters, known as the Mujahideen, who were fiercely resisting the Soviet forces. The CIA and Pakistan's intelligence agency, the IC, played critical roles in organizing the Mujahideen's operations. The U.S. provided billions in aid to Pakistan, which was funneled to the Mujahideen as part of a strategy to weaken the Soviet Union. The war, known as the Soviet-Afghan War, lasted from 1979 to 1989. In the end, after nearly a decade of fighting, the Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan in 1989, leaving the country in ruins. However, the war set the stage for future conflicts as Afghanistan descended into civil war. The rise of the Taliban, 1990s. In the 1990s, Afghanistan experienced chaos after the Soviet withdrawal. Various factions and warlords fought for control, leading to widespread instability. During this time, a new force emerged, the Taliban. A radical Islamist group, the Taliban quickly gained control of much of Afghanistan, promising to restore order and impose their strict interpretation of Sharia law. By 1996, the Taliban had captured Kabul and declared themselves the ruling government of Afghanistan. Although their rule brought a semblance of order to parts of Afghanistan, it was also marked by brutal repression, especially against women, and strict religious policies. The U.S. had little direct involvement in Afghanistan by the late 90s, but the Taliban's growing ties with terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda became a critical issue. The 9/11 attacks and U.S. intervention, 2001. On September 11, 2001, the deadly terrorist attacks carried out by Al-Qaeda changed the course of history. The attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon shocked the world, and the United States vowed to seek justice. The U.S. quickly linked the Taliban government in Afghanistan to Al-Qaeda, as the Taliban had been harboring Osama bin Laden and other terrorists. In October 2001, the U.S. launched Operation Enduring Freedom, a military campaign to overthrow the Taliban and dismantle Al-Qaeda. Within weeks, U.S. forces, alongside Afghan anti-Taliban forces, successfully ousted the Taliban from Kabul, ending their rule. However, the Taliban went into hiding, and the U.S. embarked on a prolonged military engagement to eradicate Al-Qaeda and rebuild Afghanistan. The Long War in Afghanistan, 2001 to 2021. What followed was a nearly 20-year-long war. The initial success of toppling the Taliban did not lead to peace. Instead, Afghanistan became a battleground for insurgency and counterinsurgency. The U.S. military found itself embroiled in a drawn-out war against a resilient Taliban insurgency and Al-Qaeda, while attempting to rebuild a fractured country. Throughout the years, multiple U.S. administrations, including those of Presidents George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, struggled to find a lasting solution. Troop levels fluctuated, and peace talks with the Taliban were intermittently attempted, but the situation remained unstable. Despite billions of dollars in U.S. aid and the creation of a new Afghan government, corruption, political instability, and ongoing insurgency undermined efforts. The Taliban's guerrilla tactics and the support they received from some local groups allowed them to regain power in rural areas and gradually mount a serious threat to the Afghan government. The U.S. withdrawal and Taliban's return to power, 2021 and 2021, President Joe Biden made the historic decision to withdraw all U.S. forces from Afghanistan, ending America's longest war. The withdrawal was chaotic, with the Taliban quickly advancing across the country and seizing control of Kabul in a matter of weeks. The Afghan government collapsed, and the Taliban returned to power. The withdrawal marked the end of the U.S. military's presence in Afghanistan, but it also left the country in a state of uncertainty. While the U.S. declared victory over terrorism, the return of the Taliban raised new concerns about human rights and regional stability. Conclusion: The legacy of 40 years of war. After 4 decades of war, Afghanistan remains a deeply scarred nation, caught between the ambitions of foreign powers and the determination of local groups. The U.S. and its allies' efforts to transform Afghanistan have left a mixed legacy, one of sacrifice, tragedy, and unresolved conflicts. While the war may have officially ended for the U.S., the future of Afghanistan is still uncertain. The 40-year struggle between Afghanistan and foreign powers like the U.S. has been a defining chapter in world history, and its impact will echo for generations to come.